Imagine this for a second. You're a tax collector, maybe 19th century Cairo, and you're looking at, well, a preserved human body, a mummy, and you have to decide how to tax it.
Okay, where is this going?
You tax it like a giant pickled herring or something as preserved food.
No way, really?
Absolutely happened. And it's just a really wild story tied to something we barely think about. Salt. Welcome to the deep dive. We dig into the hidden history of everyday things. And today, we're diving into Salt, A World History by Mark Kurlansky. If you've read Kurlansky, you know his style. He did Cod, right? That amazing book about fish changing the world, won a James Beard Award for it.
He's brilliant at that, taking something common and just peeling back the layers.
Exactly. So our mission today is to do the same with salt. See how the simple seasoning shaped, well, everything. Empires, wars, science, you name it.
And what Kurlansky does so well in the book, I think, is he completely flips how we see salt. You know that old French folktale? The king who thinks salt is worthless.
Oh yeah, dismisses it completely, until dinner is served without it.
Right. Kurlansky gets us to see it, for the princess's view, totally essential. A real engine for society, for the economy. It's quite the perspective shift.
So here's the question for you listening. What if that stuff you sprinkle on your fries, kind of without thinking, what if that holds the key to understanding ancient gods, empires rising and falling, even like major scientific leaps? Let's get into it. Okay, so let's go way back. Ancient times, no fancy tech. How did our ancestors even think about salt? What did they use it for?
Well, Kurlansky makes it super clear. From the absolute earliest records, it wasn't just food flavoring. It was seen as almost divine. Homer called it a divine substance.
Divine, wow.
Yeah, and Plato said it was especially dear to the gods. And this wasn't just poetry, right? It reflected a deep understanding that life depended on it. It even symbolized eternity.
Eternity, how so?
In Islam and Judaism, for example, they used salt to seal contracts. It meant the agreement was, forever, unbreakable. Ancient Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, they all used it in sacrifices, in rituals.
In Christianity.
Yep, mixed with water for holy water. And blessed salt represents truth, wisdom. Even into the Middle Ages, in parts of Africa, the Caribbean, people believed salt could, drive out evil spirits.
Yeah.
Used it in exorcisms.
That's quite a rap sheet for simple table salt. So beyond the sacred, was there a practical, maybe biological reason for all this respect? I mean, how much do we actually need it?
Oh, absolutely. That ancient reverence. It was totally grounded in biology. Kurlansky mentions this British psychologist Ernest Jones back in the 19th century.
Okay.
Jones had this hypothesis connecting salt to, sex drive and sperm production. He saw patterns in different cultures. And guess what?
He was right.
He was onto something, yeah. We know now salt is crucial for nerve function, fluid balance in our cells, basically staying alive, and reproduction, too. Your body holds about 250 grams of it.
Not a lot, but sounds important.
Vital. We lose it, constantly sweat, urine, other fluids. If you don't replace it, you can actually die. So that deep need, it was a basic survival instinct, pushed early humans to constantly search for sources.
Okay, so we desperately need it. How did people figure out how to get it reliably? And just as key, how did they learn it could preserve things?
Well, in China, legends about finding salt go back 4,000 years to the Yellow Emperor. But verifiable stuff. Kurlansky points to Lake Yuncheng in Shaanxi province. Prehistoric China. The salt would just naturally dry out in the sun.
Simple enough.
Yeah, but then they got clever.
Yeah.
The Chinese were the first we know of to start boiling seawater in clay pots. That's described over 2,800 years ago. The Romans later picked up that technique.
Boiling seawater. Makes sense.
And they kept innovating. They drilled the world's first brine well saltwater well back in 252 BC, a guy named Li Bing in Sichuan. And by the mid-11th century, they were using percussion drilling. These techniques were way ahead of their time.
Wow. And the preservation side.
Oh yeah, the Chinese were preserving food with salt for over 4,000 years too. Think about things like kimchi, pickled vegetables, salted eggs, those century eggs.
That's stable.
Exactly. And fermenting fish, beans, that's how you get soy sauce eventually. It made food last longer, taste different. Crucial stuff for survival and for trade later on. But incredibly, ancient Egypt's preservation game, even older than China's. They salted fish, meats, and, of course,
mummies.
Yeah. Soaking bodies in salt. Natron, actually, which is a natural salt mix. It was fundamental. They believed the soul needed the body preserved.
And that's where the weird tax comes in?
That's the detail from the book. Yeah, 19th century, you want to ship a mummy, pay the tax for preserved goods, treated like, a giant pickle. It just shows how central preservation using salt was.
That's amazing. And did Egypt trade salt itself?
Interestingly, no. Not raw salt, even though they had plenty. They exported the preserved foods, salted fish, meat mostly to the Middle East. Got better prices that way. Kicked off a trade business that lasted, wow, 4,000 years.
Okay, we've got divine status, biological need, early production, preservation, but this is where it gets really interesting for me. How does salt become power? Like political, economic power? That feels like a huge jump.
It is a huge jump, but it makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah.
It became a symbol of wealth, right? And it's pretty much the first thing governments realized they could totally control.
Control because everyone needs it.
Exactly. Take China again. During the Warring States period, this advisor, Guanzong, in the state of Qi, he basically said, wait a minute, everyone eats salt, let's control it. First state salt monopoly.
And it worked.
Oh, it worked. The profits funded the entire country, made Qi the most powerful state around. Later, the Qin dynasty used salt money for the army, building the Great Wall.
Wow. Just from salt taxes.
Pretty much. The Han dynasty later abolished the monopoly, but then brought it back to pay for wars, like against the Huns. There were huge debates about it, the famous discourses of salt and iron, basically legalists versus Confucians, arguing over state control versus free markets.
An ancient economic debate.
Absolutely. And that salt revenue, it stayed huge. Up to the Tang dynasty, like half the country's GDP came from the salt monopoly at times.
Half the GDP? That's staggering. So controlling salt meant controlling the state's finances, essentially.
And by extension, controlling the people. It created these massive power structures.
So, okay, China figured out the monopoly game early. Was this happening elsewhere? How did salt shape things outside China?
Oh, definitely. Think about Africa. For thousands of years, you had these huge camel caravans, ships of the desert, they called them.
Right, crossing the Sahara.
Exactly. And what was one of the main things they were hauling back and forth, north to south, south to north? Salt. It was a cornerstone of that whole Saharan trade network from the 3rd century onwards.
And the Americas.
The Mayans are a fascinating case study in the book. Their rise, their prosperity, it was tightly linked to making and trading salt. They even figured out how to get salt from jungle plants. Used it for medicine, traded salt blocks, salted fish, even leather treated with salt.
So it was central to their economy.
Hugely central. And here's the kicker. When their salt trade started to collapse, their whole civilization went into decline pretty quickly afterwards. It really shows how fundamental it was to their stability.
It's just wild thinking about salt being that important, which makes its status today even stranger. How did it go from empire builder to just like something in a shaker? What changed?
It's a mix of things, really. Technology, changing societies. But it wasn't always a smooth transition. There were big consequences. Take Cheshire in the UK.
Okay.
Before 1890, they produced a ton of rock salt. Nearly met the whole UK demand. But the process, small factories pumping out thick, nasty smog, air pollution was bad. But worse was underground. They were pumping out saltwater brine. Fresh water seeped in to replace it. And that fresh water started dissolving the natural salt pillars holding up the ground. Yeah. By 1880, something like 400 buildings, roads, structures had just collapsed or been badly damaged. The ground literally sank.
Yeah.
Big environmental price. And in the Caribbean, salt mining led to deforestation, dried out land, poverty. New tech eventually displaced the traditional salt workers too. So progress had real costs. And then there's the chemistry side. Once scientists figured out salt was sodium chloride, things got complicated. They isolated chlorine around 1810.
Chlorine. Yeah, I know where this is going.
Unfortunately, yeah. Warfare. Mustard gas in World War I, based on chlorine, killed tens of thousands. A horrific, unintended consequence of understanding salt's makeup.
Grim. But there were other discoveries too.
Absolutely. Using electrolysis, they separated sodium itself. Turns out it's the 7th most common element. And chemists figured out sodium carbonate, the stuff found naturally in the Egyptian mummy salt.
Right.
That led to baking soda. And understanding that compound, it spurred massive research, creating huge new industries. Food processing, glass, textiles, paper, plastics, detergents, even nylon, all spun out from understanding this simple salt component.
So unlocking salt's chemistry had these, like, explosive consequences, both terrible and transformative.
Exactly. It branched out in ways no one could have predicted.
But it wasn't just chemistry and new industries, right? You mentioned the book links salt to entirely new fields of science.
Yeah, geology's a big one. Think about it. How do you find salt underground? You drill. The technology developed for salt exploration, it directly pushed geological studies forward.
Because drilling showed what was down there.
Precisely. Salt mines revealed these vast, vast underground salt deposits. Kurlansky mentions how the salt layer under Cheshire actually stretches right across northern Europe, like most of Europe is sitting on this giant salt bed.
Wow.
And drilling for salt led to other finds. The Chinese stumbled onto natural gas over 2,000 years ago doing it. And Americans hit oil in 1859 while drilling for brine. Changed everything.
So drilling for salt accidentally unlocked fossil fuels.
Pretty much. And archaeology benefited too. For ages, we only knew the Celts from what their enemies, like the Romans, wrote about them, conquerors, warriors, etc. Then in the 17th century, miners in a salt mine found these incredibly well-preserved bodies and tools, clothes, everyday items, all preserved by the salt.
Like the mummies, but accidental.
Exactly. And it showed the Celts weren't just warriors. They were merchants, traders, dealing in things like salt. It completely changed our understanding of their society, all thanks to a salt mine discovery.
That's a fantastic example of unexpected knowledge coming from it. Okay, so science advanced, industries popped up. But what about salt's original killer app? Preserving food. If it was so vital for millennia, what knocked it off its perch?
Two big things, really. First was canning. Came along in the early 19th century in France. Suddenly you could preserve food without tons of salt. And crucially, it tasted fresher.
Right, less salty.
Exactly. Navies like the French and British jumped on it by the 1830s. Huge for feeding sailors. And that old salted fish industry, it just started to fade away.
And the second thing?
Fast freezing. Clarence Birdseye, the American inventor, figured that out in the 20th century. Now you could freeze fish, meat, vegetables quickly and ship them inland, still fresh. Another alternative to heavy salting. Salt just wasn't the only option anymore for making food last.
So canning and freezing basically took over its main job in the kitchen. Which brings us to today. After this epic history, what's salt's job description now?
Well, it's definitely not a state monopoly anymore, or a primary symbol of wealth. The U.S. is actually the biggest producer and user now, something like 40 million tons a year. Big business, over $10 billion.
We're just eating all that.
Get this, only about 8% of it is for seasoning food.
Only 8%? What's the rest?
The biggest chunk, 51%. It's used for de-icing roads in winter.
Wow. From divine substance to road grit.
Quite the journey, isn't it? And of course, now we're much more aware of the health downsides of too much salt, inflammation, kidney issues, heart disease. But we also know how important iodized salt is.
Right, for thyroid health.
Exactly. Iodine deficiency is nasty, causes thyroid problems, irritability, developmental issues in kids. So adding iodine to salt, that's become a global public health standard. Its role has shifted again, from preservation to industry and specific health needs.
So tracing it all the way from this divine, sacred substance, empire builder, source of power and conflict, through scientific discovery, to basically, melting snow and adding iodine. Kurlansky's book really does show how much history is packed into that one little grain. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. And it just hammers home that tiny everyday things can have these enormous world-shaping impacts. It makes sense why the Romans called the Celts Galli, right, from the Greek, for salt. Or that phrase, "you are the salt of the earth," still means someone essential, valuable.
Yeah, it's embedded in our language even if we don't think about why.
Exactly. Makes you look around differently.
It definitely does. Makes you wonder, what other common things we totally take for granted, are quietly shaping our world in ways we haven't even started to figure out yet? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.